we're going to get started because everybody seems to be assembled, and we have a lot going on this week, obviously in Capitol Hill. But we want to kick things off this morning with our Assemblyman Steve Otis. Steve is going to talk about the latest legislative session up in Albany, what was accomplished over the last several weeks when they went back in response to the COVID pandemic, and also probably say a few words as we segue into what's happening in Washington about the importance of a federal stimulus package and what a failure to pass a package might mean for the New York State and more particularly the economy in the lower Hudson Valley, and frankly the ramifications of not getting a federal aid package coming into New York. So Steve Otis is a Rye Democrat representing the 91st Assembly District, which includes large swaths of Westchester County, Larchmont, Mamaroneck, New Rochelle, Portchester, Rye, and Rybrook. Among his standing committee assignments are corporations, authorities, and commissions, local governments, and education. So he is particularly well positioned to talk about the impacts of what's happening in Washington on New York, in addition to the work that he's doing up in Albany. So welcome, Steve. Thanks for joining us this morning, and you can take it from here.
Thank you, Michael. And as I expressed to Michael and to Bill Mooney over the years, I'm a big fan of the Westchester County Association and the role that you play for the life of the county, and thrilled to be with you. I think what I'd like to start to talk about is actually the economy. And we obviously had, not surprising, but bad news in the reports yesterday from not just on the GNP, but also with continued very solid, large new unemployment insurance claims. And none of this is a surprise, because I think as you are experiencing, as businesses, as state legislators are experiencing, dealing with many of the businesses in Westchester, but also dealing with constituents who are out of work, possibly dealing with not-for-profits who are really struggling. The economic impact of what we are going through is huge and is going to be with us for a while. And so one thing that I would like to do in hearing, I'll talk a bit about a little bit what's going on in Albany, but I really like to talk about the financial challenges and hear about what your businesses are facing and what people in your sectors are facing, and find ways that state government can be helpful. But the big picture is with the real, what we're calling in a sense a recession, but it's going to feel more like a depression. Everything, the economics of everything have changed. And whether that is for a school district, for a local government, for a state government, or for businesses, what the economic formula was for you to be in the black, for any of those institutions to be functioning on a level footing, is upside down, and it is a real struggle. We passed a state budget this year that basically was just about a little over 1% over last year's budget. My prediction would be that at the end of next year, we'll probably end up spending less than we spent in the previous year, because we're not going to have the money. It is projected that without federal aid, we're looking at least a $13 billion shortfall in revenues to the state. Most of the state's funding doesn't go to state agencies. It goes back to basically either the education sector or the healthcare sector, and everything is really on hold. One of the key economic development activities of the state that you're all familiar with is the state's consolidated funding application process, the regional economic development councils. And so we don't have a clear picture of what is going to happen with that this year. We allocated money, in a sense, tentatively, but no indication from the governor's office whether that is going to be able to go forward, or maybe on a scaled down basis. The governor pulled yesterday the proposal for an environmental bond issue that was to be on the ballot this year. And that is going to be postponed at least till next year. And I think even though I'm a strong environmental person and strong record in environmental issues, I think you'd be hard put to say that that wasn't anything but a wise and prudent decision, given the uncertainties in the economy. Local sales tax revenues are down statewide by a substantial amount. Earlier in the pandemic, when we did a statewide analysis of sales tax dips, actually Westchester was not hit as badly as most other parts of the state, but I think that's probably going to level off. And that not only affects, obviously, businesses, but that affects local governments and the county as well. So there are a lot of challenges. When we passed the budget, included in the budget was the ability for the governor to withhold payments of certain things until we see what the financial picture is going to be, what revenues are. The legislature does have the ability to come back and override some of those decisions. And when we hear what happens from Washington, we will see what happens there. But Jan Fisher, who's on the call today, I was on the call last week with not-for-profit Westchester and a group of not-for-profit providers who are really struggling. As you can imagine, many of them are service providers. Many of them are partners with you, and they're service providers for people in need, and yet they're having trouble paying their bills. They're having trouble raising money. Fundraising is harder. And they also are due payments from the state that are being cut at least tentatively by 20%, but even prior payments are being withheld to the not-for-profit community. So there are big struggles. In terms of the legislative session, we had a very disjointed legislative session. Basically, we were there. Once the pandemic hit, we stopped meeting on a regular basis. We met in the last week of March to pass the budget. We met briefly for a few days in May to pass COVID-related legislation, certain things that were required for those issues. We met for a few days in June to deal with racial equality agenda and to deal with basically law enforcement accountability issues in the response to what happened in Minnesota and really what's happening around the country. A realization that there is work to be done in terms of equity and equality in a bunch of sectors. And then a couple of weeks ago, we came back and did sort of an end of session, although it's not really an end of session. I imagine we're going to go back to do basically a number of housekeeping things, but was not a full legislative session. But we've been working our tails off because the number one activity that any legislative office that you're dealing with will tell you is helping people get their unemployment insurance claims filed. And there's a lot of red tape and a lot of nuance and complications, whether it be traditional unemployment insurance or the PUA program, which is administered by the New York State Department of Labor, but also helping a lot of businesses that have unique problems. Can they open? How can they open? Can we get Empire State Development is basically the juncture point for many businesses. And a lot of the work I've been doing is really detailed in terms of trying to make a case for certain businesses. Do they have protocols that Empire State Development and the Department of Health can give a green light to so that they can open? And what are the nuances? Do they have to do curbside? Can they do inside their stores? And some of these things we're in advance of the phases and the phased reopening. But it's a dangerous disease that is affecting the medical health of so many. These are very tragic and challenging times. Like you, I know people who have passed away. I know people who have had the disease and survived it. And so it's not a time for us to lighten up and make believe that it's just like the flu. It is not.